I was never truly a son. That truth had been stitched into my skin long before I understood what adoption meant. I wasn't theirs by blood, and blood meant everything in the house where I grew up. I was a placeholder, someone to scold when tempers ran hot, someone to fetch things when laziness weighed on their limbs. Useful, but never cherished. Even now, at 23, the reminder sat with me at every family dinner. My father only looked at me when he wanted something. My siblings spoke around me, not to me. And my mother, if she could still be called that, had a talent for reminding me of my place with a smile sharp enough to cut. That night, when they called me into the study, I already knew whatever it was would have nothing to do with my good. "Sit down, Ethan," my mother said, her tone smooth, deliberate. I obeyed, lowering myself onto the stiff chair across from her desk. My father leaned back with his arms crossed, a dark cloud hanging over his face. My siblings lounged on the sofa, scrolling through their phones like they couldn't be bothered. "You're aware of our financial situation," my mother began. A bitter laugh threatened to crawl up my throat, but I swallowed it down. Situation was one way to describe the mountain of unpaid loans and the debt collectors knocking at our door. "Yes," I said carefully. Her lips curved. "We've found a solution. A marriage proposal." The words landed like a brick in my stomach. Marriage? To Williams Kane. The name froze me in place. Of course I'd heard of him. Everyone had. Williams Kane, CEO of Kane Group, one of the most powerful corporations in the country. Disabled after an accident years ago, now confined to a wheelchair. Ruthless, brilliant, feared. His name was synonymous with power, with ice. And they wanted me to marry him. My pulse thundered. "You can't." My father slammed his hand against the desk. "You'll do it. Do you think you're in a position to refuse? Do you think anyone else would want you? This is your chance to be useful." Useful. That was all I ever was to them. My mother smoothed a non-existent crease in her blouse. Williams's stepmother suggested it herself. She wants someone to care for him. And in return, the Kanes will wipe our debts clean. It's already decided. Already decided. Like I was a chess piece they could move across the board without question. I felt the walls closing in. But what choice did I have? If I said no, the debt would crush us all. And even if it killed me to admit it, I knew they'd happily sacrifice me anyway. "Yes," I whispered, my voice hollow. "I understand." My mother's smile sharpened. "Good boy." It wasn't until later, when she cornered me in the kitchen, that the true weight of my role became clear. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You'll be more than a husband. You'll be my eyes." I froze, the spoon clattering in the sink. "Your eyes?" She leaned close, her perfume cloying. "Williams's stepmother is a dear friend of mine. She's worried about him. She asked for someone who could watch him closely, report back. Do you understand what I'm saying?" My chest tightened. "You want me to spy on him?" Her smile didn't waver. "Don't make it sound so ugly. Just observe. Tell us how he's doing, what he hides, who he trusts. The Kanes are a powerful family, Ethan. If you do this right, you'll secure your place with us. Fail, and..." She tilted her head, her eyes gleaming. "Well, I'd hate to see you thrown away." Thrown away. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails bit into my palms. She didn't even try to hide the truth anymore. I was disposable. A pawn on her board. And yet, all I could do was nod. The introduction dinner was arranged 2 nights later. The Kane estate was everything mine wasn't: grand, imposing, suffocating in its wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from ceilings high enough to hold silence. Servants moved quietly through the halls, trained to avoid eye contact. We were escorted to the dining hall, a table long enough to seat 20, though only 6 places were set. At the head sat a woman with lacquered hair and eyes like polished stone, Williams's stepmother. Beside her, empty, was the seat meant for him. She greeted us warmly, her smile stretched too tight. "I'm so glad you could join us. We've been eager to meet the young man who will be joining our family." My stomach knotted. Her gaze flicked to me briefly, assessing, calculating. It wasn't long before the doors opened, and he entered. Williams Kane. Even seated in his wheelchair, he carried the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His face was cut in sharp lines, his expression carved from ice. And his eyes, cold grey, unblinking, swept over me once before moving on, as though I were insignificant. "Williams," his stepmother said sweetly. "Come sit. Meet your future spouse." He wheeled himself to the table, every movement controlled, powerful despite the chair that bound him. He sat across from me, his gaze unreadable. Dinner passed in strained politeness. My mother chatted about family ties and fate. His stepmother cooed about how nice it would be for Williams to finally have companionship. I kept my eyes on my plate, acutely aware of his presence across from me, of the weight of his silence. At one point, I dared to glance up. His eyes were already on me. Cold. Sharp. As if he could see straight through the layers of duty and fear to the truth buried beneath. That I didn't want this. That I wasn't here for him at all. I dropped my gaze quickly, heat rising to my face. When dinner finally ended, I thought I could escape. But as I slipped into the corridor, a voice stopped me. You. I turned. Williams was there, alone, his chair positioned deliberately to block my path. Up close, his presence was suffocating. You're Ethan, he said. Not a question. Yes, I managed, my voice catching. He studied me for a long moment, silent, calculating. Then, they think I don't notice. His voice was low, smooth as steel. The way they plant people around me. The way they test me. You're just the newest pawn. My blood ran cold. I don't. His lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. If you're here to spy for them, then do it well. Just remember one thing. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing mine. In this house, pawns are the first to be sacrificed. The air left my lungs. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Williams's eyes narrowed, as if satisfied by my silence. Then he wheeled past me, his presence like a storm receding down the hall. I stood there, trembling, the echo of his words clawing at my chest. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a marriage. This was a war. I used to imagine a wedding as something warm, filled with laughter, flowers, and promises whispered with trembling sincerity. But when the day finally came for me, it was nothing like that. It was cold, quick, efficient. The officiant's voice echoed in the marble hall, like a clerk reading a grocery list. Do you, Ethan Hayes, take Williams Kane? My mouth felt dry, but I forced the word out. I do. Williams's tone, in contrast, was smooth, steady, and utterly detached. I do. There were no smiles exchanged, no clasped hands trembling with excitement. Only two men standing side by side, tied together by ink and signatures, not love. His wheelchair gleamed under the muted light, his presence commanding despite the silence. His dark eyes slid toward me once, sharp and unreadable, before turning back to the officiant. When the rings were exchanged, I barely felt the weight of the cold band as it slid onto my finger. A symbol not of love, but of debt repaid, of shackles tightened. Applause did not follow. There were only polite nods from the few guests, mostly board members and family, who wanted the matter done and over with. My adoptive mother's hand gripped mine briefly as she whispered, "Remember what we talked about. Watch him. Report back." Her perfume clung to me long after she pulled away. Williams didn't so much as look at her. He merely wheeled himself forward, his expression carved from ice, and said in a low voice meant only for me, "Let's go." The car ride to his estate was suffocating. The interior was sleek, expensive, but the silence was heavier than the leather seats we sat on. Williams stared out the tinted window, one hand resting on the wheel of his chair folded beside him. His profile was sharp, aristocratic, his jawline a blade that seemed to cut through the gloom of the afternoon. I stole a glance at him, then quickly looked away when his gaze flicked toward me. There was something unsettling about those eyes, as if he could read the thoughts I tried so desperately to keep hidden. I remembered the introduction dinner a week ago, how he had studied me then too, his silence louder than anyone's words. I'd felt exposed, like he could see right through the act I didn't even want to play. "Are you always this quiet?" he asked suddenly, voice low, smooth, but threaded with an edge. I swallowed. Not always. Good. Silence can be useful. But in this house, silence without awareness is dangerous. The words lingered, heavy with meaning I didn't yet understand. The Kane estate was less of a house and more of a fortress. Tall wrought iron gates creaked open as the car rolled through, revealing a mansion sprawled across manicured lawns. Stone walls loomed, ivy crawling up their surfaces like veins. The air itself seemed colder here, sharper, carrying the weight of history and secrets. Servants lined the entrance as we arrived, their expressions schooled into polite masks. I felt their eyes on me, some curious, some pitying, others simply unreadable. Williams wheeled forward, not sparing them a glance. "This is Ethan Kane," he said curtly. My stomach twisted at the sound of my new name, as though I'd shed my skin and stepped into a role I hadn't chosen. "You will treat him as you treat me." A ripple of surprise passed among the staff before they bowed their heads in unison. I trailed after him, my steps echoing on the marble floors as we entered the grand foyer. Chandeliers glittered above, their light cold instead of warm. Portraits of Kane ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes following me like silent judges. "This will be your home," Williams said, stopping in the vast hall. He turned his chair slightly, finally meeting my gaze head-on. "But don't mistake this for a sanctuary. It's not." His words struck harder than I expected. He gestured, and a maid stepped forward to guide me to my room. But before I could follow, his voice cut through the air again. "There are rules," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't wander into my office. You don't speak of me outside these walls. And whatever stories you've been told by others," a ghost of a smile curved his lips, cold and sharp, "you'd do well to forget them." I froze. Did he know? Did he already suspect why I was here? His gaze lingered a moment longer before he turned away, wheeling himself down a corridor. "Dinner is at 8. Don't be late." And just like that, I was dismissed. That night, standing in the room that was now mine, I stared at the ring on my finger. It gleamed mockingly under the dim light, a reminder that I wasn't here as a husband, not really. I was here as a pawn, a spy, a debt payment wrapped in flesh and bone. But as I replayed Williams's sharp eyes and cutting words, one truth pressed down on me with terrifying clarity. This wasn't going to be a simple game of pretending. This was stepping into the lion's den, and the lion already knew I was there. I woke to silence. Not the kind of silence I was used to back at my adoptive family's house. That one was heavy with resentment, with unspoken words, and the shuffle of people pretending I didn't exist. This silence was different. It was sharp, like the house itself held its breath. I sat up in the massive bed, sheets crisp and untouched except for the small dent my body had made in the night. The curtains were drawn back, letting pale sunlight spill across the polished wooden floor. The Kane estate felt like a museum, vast and lifeless, every corner polished to perfection, yet hollow inside. A knock came at the door. "Come in," I said, my voice still hoarse from sleep. A maid stepped inside, bowing politely. "Good morning, Mr. Kane. Breakfast will be served in the east dining room. The master is already there." The title still felt strange, Mr. Kane. I swallowed and nodded. "I'll be down shortly." When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. A part of me wanted to crawl back into bed, pretend none of this had happened. But the ring on my finger glinted in the sunlight, mocking me. No amount of hiding would change what I was now, Williams Kane's husband. The dining room was large enough to host 20 people, but only 2 places were set. Williams sat at the head of the table, dressed in a crisp black suit, his chair at his side like a throne on wheels. His eyes flicked up briefly when I entered, sharp and unreadable. "You're late." Heat rose to my cheeks. Sorry. I didn't realize." "Punctuality is a habit," he said flatly, cutting into his food with precise movements. "Learn it." I bit back a retort and sat down across from him. Plates of food were laid out, eggs, toast, fruit, more than I could ever eat. My stomach knotted too tightly to enjoy any of it. For several minutes, the only sound was the quiet clink of silverware. Williams ate with deliberate calm, while I picked half-heartedly at my plate. Then his voice broke the silence. "What did my stepmother tell you?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What?" He looked at me directly now, his dark eyes like hooks. "You heard me. She didn't want a spouse for me. She wanted a spy. What exactly are you supposed to be reporting back?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened my mouth, scrambling for words, an excuse, a denial, anything. But before I could speak, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. The door swung open. "Well, well," a mocking voice drawled. "If it isn't my dear brother and his new toy." I turned. A man strode in, tall and broad-shouldered, his features sharp like Williams's, but with a cruel twist to his smile. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hair slicked back with practiced arrogance. "Derek," Williams said, his tone colder than usual. "Don't look so displeased," Derek said, sauntering closer. "Can't a brother drop by to congratulate you on your unusual choice?" His eyes slid to me, raking me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. An orphan adopted into debt, wasn't it? What a perfect match. My blood boiled, but I kept still. Derek leaned casually against the table, deliberately too close to Williams. "Tell me, Ethan, do you enjoy playing caretaker? Or do you just enjoy the Kane fortune too much to care whose lap you sit in?" I clenched my fists under the table. My instinct screamed at me to stay quiet, that speaking out would only put me in more danger. But something in Williams's expression, The way he sat there, silent but burning with restrained fury, snapped something in me. Better a fortune built on brains than one wasted on arrogance, I said sharply. My voice rang louder than I intended, bouncing off the marble walls. Derek blinked, then laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Oh, the little stray bites. He tilted his head, smirking. Careful, puppy. Bite too hard, and you'll be put down. Williams's hand twitched on the table, but he didn't interrupt. His eyes, however, were fixed on me now, studying me in a way that made my skin prickle. I pushed back my chair, standing. Say what you want about me, but don't you dare look down on him. My voice shook slightly, but the words came out firm. Wheelchair or not, Williams Kane is 10 times the man you'll ever be. The room went silent. Derek's smile faltered, just for a moment, before twisting into something darker. How touching. He leaned closer to me, his breath brushing my ear. You'll regret that loyalty, Ethan. Everyone who sides with him always does. Then he straightened, flashing a smile at Williams. Enjoy your breakfast, brother. With a mocking bow, he swept out of the room, his footsteps echoing until the door clicked shut. I realized only then that my hands were trembling. I sank back into my chair, heart racing, my chest heaving as though I'd just fought a battle. Williams was watching me. Not coldly this time. Not suspiciously. Just watching. I avoided his gaze, stabbing my fork into a piece of fruit to keep my hands busy. The silence stretched unbearably until his voice cut through it. You're reckless. I flinched. I know. You could have stayed silent. Most would have. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Maybe. But I'm not most people. Something flickered in his expression then. Not warmth. Not yet, but a crack in the ice. His lips curved, almost imperceptibly, in the ghost of a smirk. Interesting, he murmured, before returning to his meal as if nothing had happened. But for the rest of breakfast, his gaze lingered on me more than once. And though he never said it, I felt it, the shift. I wasn't just a pawn anymore. Not entirely. The Kane estate was like a maze designed to remind me I didn't belong. Every hall echoed with my footsteps. Every polished surface reflected my uncertainty back at me. The staff moved quietly, efficient and obedient, but I could feel their eyes on me when they thought I wasn't looking. Some seemed curious, others pitying. A few looked at me with something sharper, suspicion, maybe resentment. Williams, on the other hand, treated me with the same icy detachment every day. At breakfast and dinner, he would issue curt commands. Pass the salt. Don't be late next time. Speak clearly. The conversations we did have were brief, calculated, like he was testing the edges of me, but never letting me see the edges of him. But even in his silence, I could feel it. He was watching. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was summoned. A maid slipped me a folded note at lunch. From Madam, she whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the hall. My stomach sank. Madam Kane, Williams's stepmother. I waited until nightfall, when Williams had retreated to his study, before I followed the directions in the note. They led me to a smaller sitting room, tucked away, near the west wing. She was already there, draped across a velvet chair, like a queen waiting for her subject. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were knives. Ethan, she purred, gesturing for me to sit. How are you finding married life? I sat stiffly across from her. It's an adjustment. Her painted lips curved. Of course. You've done well to step into such a role. Not many would have the courage. Courage. That wasn't what it felt like. It felt like being shoved into a fire pit and told to smile while burning. You remember what you discussed with your mother, don't you? Her voice lowered, silk over steel. Your job isn't just to be his husband. You're my eyes. My ears. Williams has grown, unpredictable. Secretive. I need to know what he does behind closed doors. My throat tightened. I nodded faintly, though the memory of Derek's cruel smirk and Williams's dark eyes made my stomach twist. Good boy. She reached out and patted my hand. Her fingers were cold. Bring me something useful, Ethan. And remember, your family's debt isn't the only thing at stake. If Williams rises, it will be at my expense. And I don't lose. When I finally left her, the night air felt heavier, thicker, like I was suffocating under 2 weights pressing in from either side. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet, the kind of silence that played tricks on the mind. I tossed in bed, staring at the ceiling, until finally I slipped out into the hall. Maybe a walk would calm me. That was when I heard it. A low sound, the squeak of wheels on polished floor. I followed it quietly until I reached a partially open door. Light spilled into the hall. I peeked in. Williams was there. Alone. His suit jacket was tossed aside, his sleeves rolled up. Papers were spread across the massive desk, but what caught me wasn't the work, it was him. He wasn't in his wheelchair. He was gripping the edge of the desk, muscles in his arms and shoulders straining as he forced himself to stand. His jaw clenched, sweat dripping down his temple as he shifted his weight, holding himself upright for a few seconds before collapsing back into the chair with a hiss of breath. I froze, heart thundering. The rumors said he was completely paralyzed. But here he was, pushing himself beyond what anyone thought possible. Pretending weakness by day, fighting for strength by night. Before I could stop myself, I stepped inside. Williams. His head snapped up. Our eyes locked. For a moment, neither of us moved. His face was carved in shadows, his expression unreadable. But the intensity in his gaze pinned me where I stood. How long have you been watching? His voice was sharp, dangerous. I just heard something I didn't mean. Answer me. His tone cracked like a whip. My pulse raced. A minute. Maybe two. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, he wheeled back slightly, eyes never leaving mine. Most people would have run straight to her by now. It took me a second to understand. Her. His stepmother. My chest tightened. I'm not most people. The words hung between us, echoing the same thing I'd told him at breakfast days ago. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me with that same unnerving focus, like he was peeling away my layers one by one. Why defend me earlier? Against Derek, he asked suddenly. I blinked. Because he was wrong. And cruel. And you didn't deserve it. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not coldness. Not suspicion. Something softer, buried deep, gone almost as soon as it appeared. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Careful, Ethan. Loyalty is dangerous in this house. I know, I whispered. Our eyes held for a long, charged moment. Then, to my shock, he turned back to the papers. You can stay. If you're going to wander at night, you might as well be useful. Hand me that file. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the folder and passed it to him. He didn't thank me. But he didn't dismiss me either. For the rest of the night, I sat quietly across from him, watching as he worked, as he pushed himself, as he revealed pieces of the man beneath the mask. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt the faintest crack in the wall between us. The days in the Kane mansion blurred into one another. Sharp mornings filled with silence, tense afternoons overshadowed by Derek's sneers, and nights where I found myself drawn to the study, where Williams worked long past midnight. I told myself I was only curious, that I wanted to understand him. But the truth was more complicated. There was something magnetic about him, something in the way his dark eyes cut through pretense, in the way he carried himself with unshakable pride despite the world believing he was broken. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to see me too. That evening, I found him where he always was, bent over papers, the lamplight tracing the hard lines of his face. His jacket was off again, his sleeves rolled up, exposing strong forearms. He didn't look up when I entered, but his voice carried across the room. You're late. My lips twitched. You've been timing me? Finally, he glanced at me, one brow arched. I time everything. I sank into the chair across from him, leaning my chin on my hand. And here I thought you just couldn't sleep either. Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of amusement. Then he turned back to the file. You're noisy. You're grumpy, I shot back. This time, the corner of his mouth curved. Barely, but enough for my heart to lurch. We worked in silence for a while, though worked might have been generous for me. I mostly handed him papers, occasionally offering to fetch tea or coffee, just so I had an excuse to hover near him. At one point, he reached for a document that had slipped out of reach. Instinctively, I moved first, leaning across the desk to grab it. Our hands brushed. It was nothing, a simple, fleeting touch. But the heat that shot through me left me frozen, my breath caught in my throat. He didn't move either. His fingers lingered against mine, deliberate this time. When I finally looked up, his eyes were on me, steady and searching. The air between us thickened. I swallowed hard, willing myself to pull back, but I couldn't. Not when his gaze felt like gravity, pinning me in place. You confuse me, he said softly. My voice came out hoarse. Why? You're supposed to be their pawn. Their spy. His eyes darkened. Yet here you are, defending me, staying by my side. Why? I hesitated, heart hammering. I couldn't tell him the truth, not all of it. But I could give him a piece. Because you're not what they say you are, I whispered. You're more. And I want to know who you really are. For a long moment, He just stared at me, expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached across the desk and brushed his thumb over the back of my hand. It was barely a touch, but it sent shivers racing through me. "Careful, Ethan," he murmured, voice low, rough. "If you keep looking at me like that, I might believe you." Before I could reply, the door slammed open. "Still playing house, I see." Derek's voice was a sneer, slicing through the tension like a blade. I jerked back instinctively, heat rushing to my face. Williams's expression shuttered in an instant, walls slamming back up as he wheeled slightly away from me. Derek leaned casually against the doorframe, eyes glittering with malice. "Tell me, brother, how long before your little husband realizes he's nothing but a pawn in a game too big for him?" My blood boiled. "Shut up, Derek." His smirk widened. "Oh, the pet has teeth." He pushed off the frame, stepping closer. "You don't belong here, Ethan. And when this all comes crashing down, you'll be the first one they throw to the wolves." I stood, fists clenched, but before I could step forward, Williams's voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. "Enough." The authority in his tone froze Derek mid-step. For a heartbeat, the two brothers locked eyes, silent battle raging in their glares. Then Derek scoffed, turning on his heel. "This won't end well." He tossed over his shoulder before slamming the door shut behind him. The room was silent again, but the tension still vibrated in the air. I turned to Williams, chest still heaving. "Why do you let him?" "Because," Williams interrupted, his voice quieter now. "One day he'll expose himself. And when he does, I'll be ready." The coldness in his tone should have scared me. Instead, it made me ache for him, for the boy who had grown up surrounded by vipers, who had learned to survive by hiding his wounds and sharpening his mind into a weapon. Without thinking, I stepped around the desk and crouched beside his chair. His hand was still resting on the armrest, rigid. Gently, I covered it with mine. He didn't move, didn't speak. But he didn't pull away either. And in that silence, something shifted between us, fragile, dangerous, but real. The Kane mansion had started to feel less like a prison, and more like a strange kind of limbo. Days bled into each other. Hushed breakfasts, endless corridors, Williams disappearing into his office, while I floated around pretending I belonged. But little by little, things shifted. He no longer treated me like empty air. He'd ask if I'd eaten, sometimes push a plate toward me at dinner. A curt nod here, a dry remark there. They were crumbs, but I clung to them. Maybe it was pathetic, craving attention from a man who could cut me down with a single glance. But there was something about Williams. The way his sharpness wasn't cruelty, just defense. A man who had been cornered too many times and decided to bare his teeth before anyone could bite him first. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I wanted to be the one he didn't have to defend against. It happened late one night, when the mansion was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered, half expecting to find him in the study again, hunched over contracts like always. But he wasn't in the study. I found him in a side room I'd never entered before, bare except for a set of parallel bars and a cushioned mat. My breath caught. He was gripping the bars, jaw clenched, sweat dripping down his temples as he strained to lift himself from the chair. His legs trembled violently under the weight, but he pushed, muscles taut with effort. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, voice raw. "Stand." My chest tightened. This wasn't the image of a man defeated by his body. This was a man fighting it with everything he had. I didn't mean to make a sound, but the floor creaked beneath my foot. His head snapped up instantly, eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" His voice was like ice, sharp and cutting. I froze. I couldn't sleep. I didn't mean to. "Get out!" The command cracked through the air, but instead of leaving, I stepped forward. My heart pounded, but something deeper than fear kept me rooted. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not leaving." His eyes narrowed, fury flashing there, but underneath shame. Vulnerability he didn't want me to see. "You shouldn't be here," he bit out. "You shouldn't see me like this." "Why not?" I asked softly. "Because it makes you human?" The silence that followed was deafening. His grip on the bars trembled, his entire body rigid. For a moment, I thought he'd throw me out himself. But then his legs gave way, and he sank back into the chair with a hiss of frustration. Without thinking, I rushed forward, crouching in front of him. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "Don't." His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. His touch was hot, almost burning. His eyes locked onto mine, fierce. "Don't look at me with pity." I swallowed hard. "It's not pity." He searched my face, as if trying to find the lie. But there wasn't one. "I meant it." Slowly, his grip loosened. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked tired. Human. Then what is it? He asked hoarsely. The truth slipped out before I could stop it. It's wanting to be there for you. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. His gaze softened, just barely, like a crack in armor. Then he let go of my wrist and leaned back, exhaling. Stubborn, he muttered, almost to himself. I smiled faintly. You have no idea. The next morning, he surprised me. Get dressed, he said at breakfast, not even glancing up from his coffee. I blinked. For what? A drive. A drive. 2 words that shouldn't have made my heart race, but did. An hour later, we were in the back of the sleek black car, the city unfolding outside the tinted windows. Williams wore a dark tailored coat, his expression unreadable as always, but there was a restlessness in his posture, like he wasn't sure about this either. We ended up at a quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of the city, far from the Kane name and its shadows. The staff clearly knew him, because they didn't fuss, didn't stare. They simply nodded and gave us space. I realized then, this was deliberate. He had chosen a place where he wasn't a CEO or a Kane, where he could just be. We sat across from each other, steam curling from mugs of coffee. For a long while, neither of us spoke. It was strange, how comfortable the silence felt. Finally, I leaned back, studying him. So, is this a date? He shot me a look that could have frozen lava. Relax, I said quickly, grinning. I was kidding. A pause. Mostly. His lips twitched, the tiniest ghost of a smile. You're insufferable. And yet here you are with me. I shot back. This time, the smile wasn't a ghost. It was real. Small, fleeting, but real. And my chest ached at the sight. On the way back, the sky turned dusky, streaked with orange and violet. The car was quiet, except for the hum of the engine. I stole a glance at him. His head was tilted against the window, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Thank you." His eyes opened, turning to me. For what? For letting me see this side of you. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze heavy, unreadable. Then, to my utter shock, he reached out. His fingers brushed against mine on the seat between us. Tentative, hesitant. The touch was light, almost nothing at all. But to me, it was everything. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. For the first time since the cold, quick wedding that had bound us, I felt like something real was beginning to grow between us. Fragile, dangerous, but real. And it terrified me how much I wanted it. For the first time since the wedding, the mansion didn't feel like a cage. Williams and I had fallen into something that almost resembled routine. Breakfasts weren't silent anymore. Sometimes he'd comment on the news, and I'd throw in sarcastic remarks until the corner of his mouth twitched. Afternoons were quieter, but he no longer shut me out entirely. And at night, I always seemed to find myself drawn to the study, where he worked, or to that small room with the parallel bars, where he practiced standing when he thought no one would see. And sometimes, just sometimes, he let me stay. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something. And it terrified me. Because with every glance, every brief brush of his hand against mine, I was sinking deeper into a man I was never supposed to love. A man my family had thrown me at like bait on a hook. A man whose trust one was supposed to betray. Except I couldn't. Not anymore. I was his, whether I admitted it or not. That's why, when Derek cornered me in the West Wing corridor, my chest locked tight. He leaned lazily against the wall, arms crossed, lips twisted into a smirk that made my skin crawl. You've gotten comfortable, haven't you? I froze, pulse jumping. What do you want, Derek? His smirk widened, shark-like. Oh, nothing. Just thought we should have a little chat. About why you're really here. Cold dread flooded me. My throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, Ethan. He pushed off the wall, closing the space between us. His voice dropped, cruel and silky. Mother told me everything. How your precious parents owed money they couldn't repay. How my darling mother so generously offered a solution. How you're not a husband, you're a spy. My brother's very own little watchdog. My stomach plummeted. He knew. He knew everything. My voice cracked and I hated it. It's not like that anymore. Oh, spare me the puppy eyes, Derek sneered, cutting me off. You can play house all you want, but at the end of the day, you're here to report back. Don't forget it. I swallowed hard, trying to hold my ground. And what if I don't? His smirk sharpened into something colder. Then I'll tell him. The world tilted. Williams. If he found out now, if he found out from Derek, he'd never believe me. Everything we'd built would shatter. You wouldn't, I whispered. Derek leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. Try me. I flinched, but he caught my wrist before I could step back, his grip bruising. Here's what's going to happen, he said softly, menace dripping from every word. You're going to feed me everything I need to know about dear brother's little projects, his alliances, his weaknesses. You'll spy for me now. And if you don't, he smiled, slow and vicious, I'll make sure he hears the truth from me. Every dirty little detail. And when he throws you out, maybe you can crawl back to that pathetic family of yours. Rage burned hot under my fear. I yanked my hand free, glaring at him. I'll never betray him. Derek's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. Oh, you already have. You just haven't admitted it yet. He brushed past me, his shoulder knocking into mine. Tick-tock, brother-in-law. Make your choice. I didn't realize how badly I was shaking until I reached my room. My hands trembled as I locked the door behind me and sank onto the bed, burying my face in my palms. He knew. Derek knew everything. And worse, he wasn't bluffing. If he told Williams. The thought was unbearable. Williams's face, the rare softness in his eyes, the trust he was beginning to show me, it would all vanish in an instant. He'd see me as a liar, a traitor, just another viper waiting to sink my teeth into him. I wanted to run, to disappear before Derek could make good on his threat. But I couldn't. Not when Williams needed me. Not when I needed him. The next day, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. I sat across from Williams at breakfast, forced a smile when he glanced up at me. But I could feel Derek's shadow lurking behind every thought, every word. Are you all right? Williams asked suddenly, his gaze sharp. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. What? You're pale. His eyes narrowed. Something's wrong. Panic spiked. I shook my head too quickly. No, I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well. He studied me for a long moment, like he could peel back the layers and find the truth. My heart pounded. But then he let it go, turning back to his plate. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to beg him to believe me, to promise that I wasn't the enemy. But the words stuck in my throat. Because Derek was right about one thing. I had already betrayed him by agreeing to this marriage in the first place. That night, I found myself wandering again, restless and heavy with dread. I ended up outside the practice room, where faint light glowed under the door. I slipped inside quietly. Williams was there, gripping the bars, sweat glistening on his skin as he pushed himself upright. His jaw was clenched, his whole body trembling with effort. Something in me broke. Without a word, I crossed the room and steadied him, sliding my hand against his arm. He stiffened at first, but then he let me. Together, slowly, he stood. Our breaths were ragged, the silence thick. His eyes met mine, fierce and vulnerable all at once. Why are you really here, Ethan? He whispered. My heart stopped. For a second, I thought he already knew. That Derek had told him, that this was it. But he was just asking. Testing. The truth clawed at my throat, but I forced a smile, soft and shaky. Because I want to be. His gaze lingered on me, searching, dissecting. Then slowly he nodded. And I knew right then, when the truth finally came out, it would destroy him. And it would destroy me too. I knew it was coming. For days, Derek had prowled the mansion like a wolf circling prey, his smirk sharper every time our eyes met. I'd tried to stay close to Williams, to soak in every quiet moment we shared. Evenings in the study, his hand brushing mine during car rides, the way his gaze softened when he thought I wasn't looking. But no matter how tightly I clung to those fragile pieces, the truth hung over me like a guillotine. And when it finally dropped, it was worse than I imagined. It happened during a board dinner. The Kane Estate's grand dining hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and polished silver. Important faces filled the long table, men and women in tailored suits, sipping expensive wine while pretending not to notice the tension crackling like lightning. Williams sat at the head, every inch the cold, calculating CEO the world believed him to be. I sat at his side, silent, trying to keep my breathing steady. Then Derek rose, glass in hand, a predator wearing a smile. I think, he said smoothly, we should toast to family. After all, it's the people closest to us who shape our lives for better or worse. Williams's eyes narrowed. Get to the point. Derek's smile widened. Of course. My point is, how unfortunate it is when someone in the family is a liar. My heart dropped. He turned to me, eyes gleaming. Tell me, Ethan, how much has my dear brother confided in you? Enough to report back to your real masters. The room went silent. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Williams's voice was sharp, dangerous. Derek didn't flinch. He pulled out a small envelope, tossing it onto the table. It slid to a stop in front of Williams. He stood there, smug and gleaming, glass of wine raised like a victor. I think everyone deserves to know that my dear brother's spouse was planted here. A spy, bought and sent by our mother's friends. My heart slammed painfully. The whispers started immediately, low and sharp, a current of judgment cutting through the hall. Williams's head turned slowly toward me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, God, his eyes, were cold steel. Is that true? His voice was even, steady, not a single crack of emotion. My throat went dry. Williams, please, let me explain. Answer. The single word landed like a hammer. My lips trembled. At first, yes. They forced me. But I swear to you, it's not like that anymore. Enough. He pushed back his chair and stood, his movements calm, deliberate, terrifying. The whole table watched, waiting for him to explode, but he didn't. He simply adjusted his jacket, his face carved from stone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, he told the guests, his tone polite but final. This dinner is over. And with that, he left the hall. No scene. No shouting. Just silence. And somehow, that was worse. I barely slept that night, anxiety clawing at my insides. I waited for him to call me in, to demand an explanation, to at least say something. But he didn't. The next morning, I found him in the study, papers spread across his desk. He didn't look up when I entered. Williams. He raised his hand, silencing me. His eyes finally met mine, colder than I'd ever seen them. I'll make this simple, he said quietly. From now on, keep your distance. Do not seek me out. Do not appear before me unless necessary for appearances. Do you understand? It felt like my chest caved in. Williams, I never meant to hurt you. Yes, I came here under their orders, but everything changed. Do you understand? His tone sharpened, cutting through my plea. Tears stung my eyes, but I nodded. Yes. He looked back down at his papers, dismissing me as though I were nothing more than a servant. Good. You may go. I stood there for a heartbeat too long, hoping he'd look up again, hoping for anything, but he didn't. So I left. The days that followed were hell. He avoided me completely. Meals were eaten separately, his presence in the mansion a ghost I only glimpsed from afar. When we had to appear in public together, his mask was flawless, the devoted husband, the dignified CEO. But in private, there was nothing. No glances, no words, not even the faintest acknowledgement that I existed. The silence was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him listen. But what right did I have? Derek hadn't lied. I had been planted here. I had betrayed him, even if I hadn't meant to, and the guilt ate me alive. The reckoning came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, I was passing by the east corridor when I heard raised voices. I froze, pressing myself against the wall. You think you've won, don't you? Derek's voice, dripping with venom. But no matter how clever you are, brother, you'll never be rid of me. Williams's reply was calm, almost amused. You always mistake arrogance for strength, Derek. That's why you'll never beat me. A beat of silence. Then the sound of papers hitting the floor. What is this? Derek snapped. Evidence, Williams said smoothly. Every scheme, every stolen cent, every lie. Enough to bury you and your darling mother for good. You bastard. No, Williams cut in sharply, authority ringing in his voice. You brought this on yourself. You wanted a war, Derek. Consider this my answer. The next morning, the mansion was alive with chaos. Police swarmed the halls. Derek and his mother were dragged out, their screams echoing off the marble. I watched from the top of the staircase, my heart pounding. Williams stood in the foyer, unshaken, as though this had all been inevitable. And maybe it had. He was always 10 steps ahead. But when his gaze lifted to me, there was no triumph there. Only the same cold wall he'd built between us. I wanted to run down the stairs, to tell him how proud I was, to hold him and share in his victory. But I couldn't. His silence had become a cage, and I didn't know how to break it. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him alone in the study, the fire casting his face in shadows. He didn't look up as I entered. I told you to keep your distance, he said quietly. My chest ached. And I tried. God knows I tried. But I can't anymore. I can't stand this silence, Williams. I can't stand watching you carry everything alone when my voice cracked. When I love you. Finally, he looked up. His eyes pierced into me, unreadable. You love me? He repeated, voice low, dangerous. Yes, I whispered. More than I ever thought possible. At first, I was weak. I let them use me. But everything changed when I met you. When I saw the real you, strong, clever, kind in ways you don't even realize. I couldn't betray that. Not then, not now, not ever. I stepped closer, trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I swear to you, Williams, I'm not theirs anymore. I'm yours. If you'll have me. The silence stretched long and heavy. My heart thundered, every second threatening to crush me. Then slowly, Williams pushed back his chair and stood. I froze, breath caught in my throat. He walked toward me, each step deliberate. When he stopped in front of me, he lifted a hand, fingers brushing my cheek. His touch was gentle, almost hesitant. "You're a fool," he murmured, voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. A tear slipped down my face. "Maybe, but I'm your fool." For a moment, his mask cracked, and I saw it. The pain, the anger, but also the love he'd been trying so hard to bury. And then he pulled me into his arms. I buried my face against his chest, sobbing with relief as his hand cradled the back of my head. His other arm held me tightly, as though he'd never let go again. In that moment, I knew, the silence was broken. We were still scarred, still healing. But we were together. And together, we could survive anything. The house was quiet again. Not the suffocating quiet of avoidance, but a peace I could finally breathe in. Derek and his mother were gone, stripped of power, their shadows no longer poisoning the Kane mansion. For the first time since I stepped into this gilded world, I felt safe. But there was one last ghost to confront. My family. They came slinking back once word spread that Derek had fallen, and Williams had risen stronger than ever. Suddenly, I was worth noticing. Worth claiming. My adoptive mother arrived at the estate in crocodile tears, clutching her pearls like a grieving widow. "Ethan, darling, you know I only wanted the best for you. You wouldn't have all this without us." I flinched, but before I could reply, Williams stepped forward. He looked devastating in his tailored black suit, the weight of power in every line of his frame. "You're mistaken," he said coolly. "Ethan owes you nothing. You used him. Threw him into a pit you couldn't face yourselves. You'll not touch him again." My mother's mouth snapped shut. Williams's gaze cut sharper than any blade. "I've already cleared your debts," he continued. "Consider that my last act of mercy. But understand this." His arm slipped around my waist, pulling me to his side, his voice firm and final. "From this day forward, Ethan Kane is mine. His happiness, his safety, his future, mine to protect. If you or your husband attempt to contact him again, you'll regret it." My mother's painted face paled. She tried to speak, but Williams had already turned away, dismissing her. Guards escorted her out, her protests fading down the marble hall. My chest tightened as I leaned against him. "You didn't have to." "Yes," Williams interrupted softly, his hand tightening on my waist. "I did. They'll never use you again." I pressed my face into his shoulder, tears prickling my eyes. For once, they weren't tears of guilt or fear, but of relief. Weeks later, Williams surprised me. I woke one morning to find him standing by the window, sunlight haloing his form. He turned to me, and there was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Ethan," he said quietly, "we never had a real beginning. Our wedding, it was cold, rushed, a transaction. That's not what you deserve." My breath caught. "Williams." He stepped closer, slipping a velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, a ring glimmered inside, simple but elegant. "This time," he murmured, "I want to do it right. No lies. No bargains. Just you and me. Will you marry me?" I laughed through the tears blurring my vision, my hands trembling as I nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The second wedding was nothing like the first. It wasn't about grand halls or business contracts. It was about us. I stood beneath an archway of white roses in the garden, sunlight painting everything golden. Friends and allies we trusted filled the seats, faces warm and genuine. And at the end of the aisle, Williams waited for me. Not as a broken man pretending weakness, not as a CEO behind a mask, but as the man I loved. When our eyes met, everything else faded. I walked to him, heart hammering, and when I reached his side, he took my hand in his, firm and steady. The vows we spoke weren't written by anyone else. They were ours, messy, honest, imperfect, but real. I promised to never run from him again. He promised to always let me in, even when it was hard. And when he kissed me, slow and certain, I felt it deep in my bones. This was our true beginning. No more silence. No more shadows. Just us. Forever.